Most people think you need a big team or years of experience to hit six figures with your agency, but that's not true anymore. The ones growing fastest aren't hiring more, they're automating more. They've replaced endless client chaos with clean systems that run 24/7, turning cold leads into boot calls while they sleep. And right now, those who built around automation are scaling leaner, faster, and far more profitably than everyone else still stuck in manual mode. I know because I've done it. I scaled my agency from zero to over $100,000 a month and passed $1 million in revenue with just 3 people. No ads, no burnout, just automation doing the repetitive work while I focused on refining offers, targeting, and closing deals. So in this video, I'll show you the exact automation system that made it possible, the offer that converts cold, the niches that actually pay, and the workflows that let me scale without a team. By the end, you'll know how to copy the same system I still use today, the one that built a 7-figure agency from scratch. Let's start with the offer. And when I say offer, I don't mean your service, I mean the way you present it. The packaging, the promise, and the perceived value all rolled into one. It's how you answer the question every prospect is asking: why should I take you seriously and why now? It is the foundation of everything else, because no matter how advanced your systems are, if your offer doesn't grab attention and make sense instantly, nothing else matters. And it's never been more true than today. B2B services are hyper competitive. Anyone can start an agency, spin up a website, and start sending cold emails in a weekend. So when you reach out to someone, you're competing against a few people. You're competing against inbox fatigue. Everyone's saying the same thing: we'll help you get more leads, we'll scale your sales, we'll handle your marketing. That's why your offer has to do something most don't. It has to remove risk, because if you're new, nobody trusts you yet. You can't lean on reputation, case studies, or referrals. So instead of trying to convince people to take a chance, make it a bigger risk not to. A good offer in today's market follows one simple formula: we help Y get X result in time frame using mechanism without risk. It forces you to define everything that matters: the outcome, who it's for, how fast it happens, how you'll do it, and why it feels safe to try it. If your offer can't fill in those blanks, it's not strong enough to sell cold. Because people don't buy everything anymore, they buy outcomes. They don't want marketing services, they want 15 qualified sales calls this month without hiring a full-time SDR. Now, here's what that looks like in practice. If you're running a cold email agency, we help B2B founders book 20 qualified calls in 30 days using AI-powered outbound, or you don't pay. If you're in e-commerce, we help Shopify brands recover 30% more revenue in 30 days using automated email and SMS flows without touching paid ads. And if you're doing content, we help personal brands turn one long-form video into 20 short clips each week using AI editing without needing an internal team. When I first started, my offer was performance-based. Clients only paid once I booked them a qualified sales call. The reason was simple: I didn't have leverage yet, no case studies, no track record. So instead of trying to convince people to trust me, I made the offer do the convincing. If I didn't deliver, they didn't pay, and that instantly lowered resistance and got people to say yes. It worked because it aligned incentives. They wanted results, I wanted proof, and both sides only won if the system worked. But like any good idea, it didn't stay unique for long. Pay-per result became the new default, and suddenly it stopped standing out as much. So I adapted. Now one of the best offers I run is a free 1-week campaign. We set everything up, run it live, and let the results speak for themselves. Nobody else is doing that right now, as far as I know, and that's why it works so well. But the real lesson here isn't to copy my structure, it's to evolve yours. Offers have to keep changing as the market does. When competition rises, risk reduction becomes your biggest advantage. Keep lowering friction until the only logical response is why not? That's how you keep winning when everyone else is selling the same promise. But even the best offer fails if it's aimed at the wrong people. So next, let's talk about the niche and how picking the right one makes everything click. If the offer decides how fast you can convert, the niche decides whether there's anything worth converting in the first place. Most people skip this part and jump straight into sending emails, and that's exactly why their inbox stays silent. Because a bad niche doesn't mean wrong industry, it means there's no urgency, no budget, or no repeat need for what you sell. You could have the cleanest copy and the best system in the world. If the people you're targeting don't care enough to act, it's over before you start. A niche is the filter that decides where your effort pays off. Get it wrong and every metric looks broken. Open rates, replies, conversions. Get it right and even simple emails start turning into book calls. So what exactly makes a niche work? There's a pattern, and once you see it, you'll never waste time on the wrong markets again. I call it the 4 filters: demand, budget, access, and frequency. Demand. Do these businesses actively need more clients or revenue right now? If you have to convince them that they have a problem, it's not demand, it's education. And outbound doesn't work on education. Budget. Can they easily afford your service? If one new client doesn't more than cover your fee, they'll hesitate forever. Access. Can you find them easily? If you can't get clean data from Apollo, LinkedIn, or some other scrapers, you don't have a niche, you have a guessing game. And frequency. Do they need what you offer consistently, not just once in a while? One-off projects kill retention, recurring needs keep pipelines alive. Now that you know the filters, let me show you 3 niches I've personally had success in and why they actually work in the real world. First off, recruitment and staffing firms. This niche works because it's one of the few B2B markets where urgency never disappears. Every open role is a countdown clock, and the longer it stays unfilled, the more money their clients lose. That means recruitment companies can't afford slow months. They need a steady flow of businesses hiring right now. And because their fees are usually 15 to 20% of annual salary, one good placement can easily cover your retainer. That's why it's perfect for outbound. The pain is direct, the value is measurable, and the conversation is always relevant. Then pay-per-click agencies. These businesses already sell ROI, they live in numbers, but when their clients churn, it hits instantly. They know exactly how much each new client is worth, and they'll happily pay to stabilize that revenue. What makes this niche so effective is that you're trying to educate anyone. You're selling to people who already understand their lead flow, their CAC, and ROI. They just don't have the time to fix their own pipeline. That makes conversations fast, logical, and closable. One new client can mean $5,000 to $10,000 per month for them. So if your system lands even a single deal, you're already proven ROI. Lastly is B2B SaaS companies. This one's all about volume. Every SaaS founder is obsessed with demo count because demos equal MRR. Their entire business lives or dies by consistent pipeline. So the best part, the data is clean. You can filter by funding round, headcount, or tech stack and immediately know who's a fit. They also have money, venture-backed or bootstrapped. They budget for acquisition. So if you can help them book more demos at a lower cost, you're not just a service provider, you're a growth lever. That's why this niche converts so well. Clear data, high urgency, recurring revenue, and metrics they already track. When you look at all 3, recruitment, pay-per-click, and SaaS, the pattern becomes obvious. Each one has clear pain, available budget, easy targeting, and constant demand. That's the sweet spot for outbound. You don't need to overthink copy or send thousands of emails because when the market is right, even simple messaging works. And that's what most people miss. They obsess over tools and templates, but the truth is, once you're in a good niche, everything compounds. Your offer hits harder, your automations run smoother, and your results scale faster. Because when you build in a market that already wants what you sell, you stop pushing uphill. Everything starts moving in your direction. Now, knowing what to sell and who to sell it to is one thing, but the next part is where the real leverage kicks in. Because once your offer and niche are locked, the question becomes, how do you scale it without hiring a sales team or living in your inbox all day yourself? Let's talk about the third lever, automation. This is what gives me my edge. Anyone can send cold emails or scrape leads, but what they can't do is remove themselves from the process without losing quality. That's where leverage comes from, systems that work even when you're not looking. For me, automation isn't about saving time, it's about multiplying output. It lets me run campaigns, personalize every message, and manage replies automatically, all while keeping the same standard as if I did it myself. That is the advantage. It's what turned my agency from a manual grind into a predictable compounding system. And now I'll show you how that exactly works in practice, the 3 automations that keep my entire client acquisition engine running. We'll start with the first layer, lead scraping. This is where every system I run begins, obviously. There are a few different lead sources I use, Google Maps, Store Leads, even LinkedIn, and I've built a separate workflow for each of them. But the one I'll show you now is the Apollo workflow because it's the one I use most often. It takes the filtered list I've already built inside Apollo, scrapes all the relevant data, cleans it, and uploads it straight into my CRM automatically. That means every time I create a new saved search, the lead appears in my system without me touching anything. Now, let me give you some more insight into how this workflow actually runs. So you can see it's triggered by a webhook. What does a webhook mean? A webhook is basically a node which receives a signal. This signal comes from my CRM, which I use Airtable as my lightweight CRM. What does the webhook then receive? Well, in this case, the webhook receives the URL from Apollo. The URL contains all the filters that we've used to build the list in Apollo. Let me quickly show you. So in this mock search, I'm searching for CEOs running SaaS companies, having HubSpot or using HubSpot. with between 100 or 10 and 100 employees in the United States. So once I've set up my search and I've found 2,600 CEOs which fit the bill, I just copy this URL, would paste it over in Airtable, click start run, and it would send over the URL to my workflow. You could also remove this one and just input the URL here as you wish. But as you can see, I'm using a variable. So once the URL is received by the webhook, this would turn green and this would translate into the URL that I just created inside Apollo. Then I just set the start page. Usually you want to start on the first page of the search. And you set the max number of pages you want to scrape in one go. Each page contains 100 leads maximum. So if I'm scraping 3 pages, I'm scraping 300 leads. If I'm scraping 10 pages, I'm scraping 1,000 leads. Now, once I've set the parameters and I have the URL, I need to break down the URL and turn it into the filters that the Apollo API can actually work with. I'm using the Apollo API instead of any other third-party scraper because Apollo recently cracked down on third-party scrapers like Apify, which I used to use before. So we're just using the native API, which is first of all completely legal, so there won't be any crackdowns, and it's fully supported by Apollo itself, so it'll probably last forever. Now, for the Apollo API to work, we need to break down the URL into a JSON body. The JSON body is simply just the filters that we're using or we're sending over to the API, so it knows which lead for us to scrape instead of scraping all of them. I've written the code for this myself, along with my trusted partner, the large language model ChatGPT. And here's what it does. So it takes the URL, it breaks it down by all of the filters that you have inside of Apollo. So the person's location, their job title, seniority level, even the keywords, whatever. And it just mimics or reworks the search that we've already done here. That's why we only need the URL for this to work. Then it scrapes the first page. It scrapes the first page because we need to know how many pages there are. I mean, we know from our search there are 2,600 leads that can be found using these filters. So it would return the same thing, meaning there are 260 pages for us to scrape. Then we're scraping the first page. We want to scrape the first page because we need to pull into the workflow how many leads there actually are and how many pages there actually are to scrape. Well, we already know from doing research there are 2,600 leads, meaning there will be 26 pages to scrape. But still, we need to know because we need to build a page list, because for every one we're going to be doing, since we can only scrape one page at a time, we need to do 26 pages. Well, we set a max of 10, but there would be 26 possible runs, meaning every run we do would need to have a different start page number to make sure we're not scraping the same page 26 times. So with the page list created, so this would have 10 page numbers, and the JSON body created, we can now move on to the scraping the leads and their email addresses. So the first thing we do is we copy the same JSON body, just with a different start page number for each of the runs. But for the first run, it will be 1 because we're setting it, or we set it to start at page 1. Then we scrape the page again. We split the leads into chunks of 10, and then we bulk enrich those leads. Why do we need to scrape the Apollo or use the Apollo API twice? Well, for the first time, for just getting the leads or scraping the 100 people, we don't get their email addresses because that is the thing, or the Apollo service. Why do we need to scrape Apollo twice? Because the first time we're scraping the page, so scraping the 100 leads, we don't get their email addresses. That's just how Apollo works. They want you to verify or unlock their email addresses by paying a credit. So after the first scrape is completed, we now need to scrape again, but then for their email addresses using a different API endpoint. Once we have all of their information, so their contact details, their personal LinkedIn URLs, website information, work history, you name it, and we also have their email addresses now, they're being added to our CRM. So 100 leads are being added to our CRM, and I can show you the information that we do have. So their first name, full name, their email address, their job title, how long they've been at the company name, the industry they're in, the location they're at, their personal LinkedIn, the organization LinkedIn URL, and the company website URL. Once it's completed for 100 leads, it goes into a loop because we set it to a max of 10 pages. It goes through the loop 10 times until all 1,000 leads are completely enriched and added to our CRM, ready for outreach. So that is the intake system, the front end of everything. Now that the data is flowing in automatically, we're going to make it smarter because a list of names isn't leveraged until it's fully enriched. And this enrichment is where the system really compounds. The workflow I'm about to show you is my base template, the version I use in almost every campaign. But depending on your goal or your budget, you can strip it down or expand it with more data sources. If you don't need website data, for example, you can remove that node entirely and run it cheaper. Or if you want deeper personalization, you can plug in extra scrapers for things like company news or role changes. The core idea is the same. Every lead gets context, company details, website intel, and LinkedIn data, and then AI uses the information to generate personalized opening lines that sound human. It's what makes a large-scale outreach feel one-to-one. Now let me break it down for you a bit more. As I said, the first thing we're doing is we're scraping data sources. So we're scraping the company LinkedIn, we're scraping the personal LinkedIn, and then we're scraping the website, which is kind of all of these nodes because the website has multiple pages we want to scrape and get into to get all of the information and the most comprehensive picture we can get. So how does this work? So once we have the leads in our CRM, in our Airtable, which is my lightweight CRM, after scraping Apollo, we click Start Enrichment, which kicks off this workflow. We pull in one lead at a time and then start the process for each and every one of them. So the first thing is we scrape their company LinkedIn, getting the HTML and then analyzing all of the plain text so we know everything that it says in a nice clean overview we can use as input later on. Then we scrape the personal LinkedIn, so we get their work history, we get their education history, we get their certifications, we get all the information that we can possibly need from their personal profile. Very useful if you want to write some personal opening lines. And then we move over to scraping their company website. First, we start with the company homepage, usually featuring the most amount of information. So obviously you want to start there. The company homepage also features a lot of internal links. There's usually a lot of links to the about page, to the teams page, to the case studies page, you name it. So once we have filtered or once we've scraped the HTML from the homepage, we can filter that HTML for all of the available URLs. And we can then use those URLs as input for a large language model to determine which of those URLs are most interesting for us to scrape as well. Now for every website, for every B2B business, I've determined there are 4 categories generally. So there's one page usually saying something about the company and mission. There will be one page or one more important page about the offerings and positioning of that specific company. One about their process and differentiation, very useful if you want to say something about how they stand out. And then one about proof of success, where they list a bunch of case studies or testimonials, which is also a very interesting thing to mention in your outreach because it makes it seem like you actually did a deep dive onto their website. Now, once a URL has been determined for each of those 4 categories, sometimes there aren't any URLs available for some of those categories, it doesn't really matter. Then we scrape those pages individually and also analyze them individually, as I said, to get the most comprehensive picture of the website that we can get. Now then, with the company LinkedIn scraped and analyzed, with the personal LinkedIn scraped and analyzed, and almost the entire website or the most useful pages of the website scraped and analyzed, we have all the data in the world we could ever need for that specific lead and their website to write whatever personalized email we can think of. Now, obviously, we're not doing that by hand. We're using AI to do so. AI at this point can't write entire email templates, so we still have a template and we just ask AI to derive some variables based on the input, based on the data that we've gathered, to then make it seem or make it look like this email template or this email was written for the lead specifically. So to show you guys, I've added an email template. So the variables we're asking AI in this case to determine are the company overview, meaning what do they do, what industry they're in, the ICP of the lead, so what their ICP is and what their ICP might be struggling with, so the pain point the lead solves. And then with industry becoming more competitive, so once again, this should be company overview, just different wording because you don't want to say the same thing twice, looks a bit lazy. Now if I scroll a bit down, you see I have given some guidelines. So I want the company overview to be 3 words maximum. It should be a short, compelling phrase describing their core service and expertise. Then the ICP of the lead, 4 words maximum, who their ideal clients or placements are in natural language. And the list goes on and on until it outputs me each of these variables, which I can then upload to Instantly. And once they're uploaded to Instantly fills in the email template, which would be the same one that I have here, fills it in with the variables that were just uploaded and sends it out to one of the leads from my CRM. So all 1,000 leads get a different email. They all get a personalized email based on information I scraped about them and I scraped about their company. Now, obviously, the variables in this template are just some examples. as I said, by scraping these data sources and the possibility of scraping whatever data source you can think of or you think is relevant for your messaging, you could basically personalize every email in whatever way you can think of, really standing out from the competition and standing out in the inbox, making it seem like the email you sent was handwritten and meant for that person only, while the same template was sent to 1,000 leads. Now, every lead in the CRM isn't just data, it's a conversation waiting to happen. And the final layer is what keeps those conversations alive automatically. The last piece is inbox management, and it's the one most people completely overlook, because once the replies start coming in, that's where most operators fall behind. This workflow categorizes and replies automatically, so every opportunity gets handled in seconds, even when I'm not checking the inbox. That's what keeps my pipeline alive 24/7. As I mentioned before, I use Instantly as my sending tool, and Instantly has this feature they call the Unibox. The Unibox is basically a master inbox. I can link all of my sending accounts to Instantly, using them to send. But once they receive a reply, all of those replies will also be available in the Unibox. And once I receive a reply to any of my cold outreach, Instantly will send over a trigger, a webhook, triggering this workflow, pulling in all of the unread emails. And since every unread email I receive is automatically processed and then marked as read, I'll never pull in the same email twice. I then get the lead info, which is just using the email address we received the reply from, checking it with our CRM to get all of the information I could possibly need to then add that or update that CRM or then update that lead's status. Then we move over to splitting out and ordering the email. So we're checking which emails I sent, so what part of the sequence we're in. We're checking if we've received only one reply to our cold outreach, or if this is the second reply, meaning we've sent cold outreach before. They replied to one of our initial sends. We've replied back automatically, and now they're replying again. If they're replying for the second time, so if the reply is more than one, we want to hand this off to a human, because they're most likely asking either a very specific question or they're asking to set up a meeting or anything like that. Nevertheless, they're a very valuable lead, so we want to handle this ourselves instead of letting the AI handle it for the off chance it makes a mistake. Once it's split out and we verified that they've only sent one reply back to our outreach, the email sequence or the response is classified. And once it's classified, it's sent down the appropriate route. Now, I've determined the following routes. A lead can ask for more information generally, ask to schedule, ask or say that they're not the right person to reach out to, ask to be followed up later, ask to be not reached out to again, so unsubscribe from your mailing list or your mailing sequence. And they can send something which is so out of the ordinary that the LLM can't classify it at all, meaning it's handed off to miscellaneous. Now, as you can see, some of these routes split into different branches here at the end. For example, for the more information needed route, where they ask more information, there are three options. They can ask a general question, meaning they're probably asking you to take you up or pick you up on your offer, whatever you offered in your call to action in your outreach. Could be a Loom video, could be to send over a case study, you name it, standardized. They could be asking a more specific question, which then you would need the AI for to fill that in, to answer that question for you. Meaning you would have to upload the information about your business to this AI prompt. And then lastly, they could ask about pricing, which is just such a common question. I split or made an entire branch for this. You can see that I've already added some templates. So let's say someone is asking for more information. So they're classified more information. And they're asking me to send over whatever I promised or offered them in my call to action. Could be a case study or could be a mock lead list, for example. They are being updated in Instantly. So they're being added to a subsequence. As you have the main sequence, which is just your initial cold outreach. Could be 3, could be 4 emails, telling them or asking them if they're interested in your offer. And once they have replied, they're being added to a subsequence. So the status of the lead is changed, adding them to a different flow. And in this case, the flow would be a 3-letter or 3-email flow. Let me zoom in so you guys can read this. So this is the first one. And then if they don't reply to the first one, they would automatically be followed up with email 2 after a set number of days. If they don't reply to that one, they'll be automatically followed up with email number 3. That's how we automating everything. We're automating not only the responses with templates, which work just as well as 99% of the handwritten replies, I'm very sure. And they're also being automatically followed up, so we're not dropping the ball or forgetting about them later on if they don't get back to us within a day or two. And that is basically the full stack working together. So data comes in, contact gets added instantly, and conversations never stall because of the inbox manager. It's a system designed to run continuously, no matter how many campaigns are live. Now, if you want to copy any of the workflows I just showed or plug in the full stack, you can get them all inside Scaling Systems through the link in the description. They are completely plug and play, ready to import into your own setup, and I've also recorded step-by-step setup videos for each one so you can follow along without guesswork. Now, to bring this all together, what you've seen isn't just a few nice automations or catchy frameworks. It's the operating system that took my agency from a manual grind to a predictable machine. Each lever you've seen, so the offer, niche, and automation feeds the others. None of them stand alone. The offer creates attention. It's the reason someone even opens your email. When your promise is specific, low risk, and backed by logic, people lean in, not because of persuasion, but because the value is obvious. The niche focuses that attention. It filters out noise and puts your message in front of people who actually feel the pain that you solve. When the market is right, with real urgency, budget, and repeat demand, you stop guessing which campaigns will land. Every cent gives you clean, useful data because you're speaking to people who care. And lastly, the automation stack multiplies everything that works. It keeps the machine running, capturing responses, organizing leads, and handling replies without adding headcount. It turns repetition into systems and systems into consistency. That's where the real leverage kicks in. Each lever strengthens the others. A stronger offer converts better, which gives you more proof to double down on your best niche. A focused niche delivers cleaner feedback, which makes your automation faster and more predictable. And automation closes the loop, freeing up time to keep improving the offer and the message. That is the compounding effect. Every campaign sharpens the next. You stop running disconnected tactics and start running a flywheel, one that learns, adapts, and scales without needing more people. When all three are in sync, you're no longer chasing clients. You're running a predictable, self-improving system that turns attention into meetings and meetings into revenue. And that's the real blueprint. Now, if you want to build this same system for yourself, not just understand it, that's exactly what I teach inside Scaling Systems Society. It's the full roadmap to go from zero to a predictable client machine. You'll build the same three levers you just saw: a high converting offer, a profitable niche, and a full automation stack that keeps it running. By the end, you'll have a complete outbound engine booking calls, handling replies, and closing clients automatically without needing a team. It's the same framework that took my agency past $100,000 a month, built so you can do it step by step. So if you're ready to stop chasing clients and start scaling with systems, the link is in the description below. I'll see you guys inside.